Welcome to another episode of Knowledge is Power, where we come together to share with you knowledge. I believe that once we have the knowledge we need, we can start to change our world, change our environment, and do better for ourselves. Today, I have an expert here, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Hi, thank you, Martha.
So please tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Well, I will tell you a little bit more about it in the presentation when I give you a little bit of my background to tell you why this topic matters to me so much. In a nutshell, I am a leadership and emotional skills expert, and I focus on teaching people all those skills we're supposed to have, but that nobody really teaches us formally.
I
So
love that.
yeah, so I work in the space of companies. I help people create really healthy team cultures. I help leaders become really effective and let go of micromanagement and have a life after work. And I also help people in a personal context create really healthy relationships with themselves as well as with others.
That is beautiful. So, our topic today that we wanted to talk about is the art of emotional productivity using the essential human skill for thriving. I think a lot of us in business that we don't really understand all the science behind people's thinking and all of different things that we do. So, I would love for you to actually share with us what is going on, how much that we can actually learn from you onto it, and tell us a little bit understanding of how to manage emotion and boundary to protect our well-being. So the
Okay.
floor is yours. I'll be on the background helping you to monitor all the chats.
Okay, thank you. I just had somebody enter the waiting room. Is that for
Yes,
you?
there you go. It probably is in our Zoom area there. That's
Okay.
okay.
All right. I'm going to share screen.
Yep.
Um, Okay, so we've had a bit of a technical hiccup. So what you can see now is, I hope you can see this.
Yes, we can see that. That's
So
perfect.
it's just the simple slides without any funky graphics and movements and all of that because we can't make that happen. But hopefully the content will be suitable for you to get an understanding of what it is that is so important. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what are human skills and why do they matter? And why do they matter to me? And hang on, I'm just going to move this over because I don't know what the next slide is all about because I don't get my presenter's note. I don't get anything. So allow me to just take a deep breath and just get back into it. Okay. Can you still see my screen, Martha?
No, it's turning to black at the moment.
Okay. Can you
Yep,
see it?
now we can see. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me just because I don't really want you to see my presenter's notes. That would take the magic out of it. So forgive me for this. Can you still see this?
Yes, we can see that very clearly. It's a good presentation slide.
Okay, great. Okay, so what are human skills? So I call this the 11 practices of emotional productivity, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Okay, now click, come on. Okay, so I like dictionary definitions because what they do is they help us get really clear on what things are all about. So human skills are also known as soft skills or interpersonal skills. So what they do is they regulate how, or they are the skills that we need to have effective communications with other people to build relationships. And they're particularly important in environments where we need to work together. And that is both personal and professional. So what they do is when we have the human skills, we're able to build the connection, we're building the trust. And what we also do is we build the ability to be resilient to stress because human skills enable us to deal with other people. And I hear this over and over again. My life would be so much easier if it weren't for other people. So this is why these skills matter so much. The reason why they matter more than ever is because we now live in a world that is completely connected or disconnected, depending on how you look at it. And it is really difficult these days to connect Because I mean, as much as I love Zoom, but when we connect with each other, it's really just a way of seeing part of the person over a distance. It's very task focused. When we get together first, person to pay person, we have a very different interaction than the one we have on Zoom, because we continue to explore each other on a completely different level. So the other thing is we are just so focused on getting things done. Again, as I said, when I meet with people on Zoom, it's generally for an hour. We immediately get into things and we're done. When we get together face to face, it's generally much longer. It's much more relaxed. We can also see much more of each other and we can connect in a totally different way. And so when we get into this doing thing, we forget that we're actually human beings. And that's why these skills are so important, because they connect us from a place that allows us to build that trust and that connection that I mentioned before. Okay, the other thing, of course, is artificial intelligence is just growing rapidly. I mean, really, really crazy over the last few months alone. And so what happens is now we don't need to write anymore. We don't need to, when we write emails, when we write letters, we don't need to put our own words into it, our own sentiments, our own thoughts and feelings. We can just get an artificial intelligence to write that. And sometimes we may not express it the way it can actually land with the other person in a way that it builds that trust and that connection. So it's really important to have the skills to be able to use artificial intelligence in a way that you still maintain the relationship. The reason how human skills have been important all along is because we pass all of these dysfunctional, often very dysfunctional patterns on from generation to generation. So I didn't give you any more of my background, but I actually studied counseling at some point. And I learned that I had to go actually and explore my own family background going 4 generations back. And I discovered that we had the same patterns from generation to generation to generation. One of them was to have very unhappy marriages. So people would stay in very dysfunctional relationships. And some of these ended very tragically and really caused a lot of drama and unhappiness. So that's why I decided from a very early age I wasn't going to do that. I was going to start doing things differently. So that's why I've been studying all of these modalities. So the reason why these things get passed on is because a lot of these skills are actually hidden, and these patterns are hidden underneath the surface. So, for example, what you can see above the surface, like an iceberg, which is just 10%, is how we dress, for example, how we live. So, for example, houses are getting much bigger and backyards are getting much smaller because we're spending much more time inside. But the things that we pass on is food, for example. I mean, I know in my family, there was a saying, food goes through the stomach. So anytime somebody wanted to express their love, they would cook a special meal. Now, none of these things are not necessarily conscious. We don't know how we like handling emotions. That's one of those things that get passed on from generation to generation. I grew up with a lot of men who raged and ranted, and a lot of women who medicated their emotions literally with either tablets or depression when they were not treated, or other not things that were not so helpful. So there were all sorts of things that happen when you don't know how to manage emotions. When you know what's really important to you, when you know how to deal with your boundaries, with your emotions, with your needs and all of that, you can actually overcome all of these limitations of the things that are underneath the surface and bring them to the surface and define things in a completely different way, because you change your behavior and you change the way in which you deal with things. Okay, so dysfunctional families, that is one of those things that when you think about what do human skills have to do with dysfunctional families? Well, a lot of these skills are not practiced functionally in families where you have all of these messages and all of these aspects and patterns that I've got on the screen here. So again, I've already mentioned medicating and addictions, but it's also don't rock the boat, as in we have unhappy marriages. We're not even going to talk about it. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing because there's low self-esteem attached to it. Family members play against each other. I don't know about you, but I grew up in so much drama. And it was really painful because we weren't allowed to talk about feelings. And so there were family secrets, like what will the neighbors think? I mean, some of these things you may have heard before, but again, these are things that are very common, and I've heard them over the past 27 years of being a coach over and over and over again. So just giving you a little bit of an idea of where I come from, this is me in my early years. So I was an unwelcome baby. I was an unplanned pregnancy, and my parents had to get married because of me. And then you can see I was not quite impressed. My mother said I used to sleep for 12 hours and then I would cry for 12 hours. And so then you can see me in my teenage years. I was very, very unhappy teenager. And then in my early 20s, I started expanding. I started traveling. This is in China, I have lived in 10 different countries so far and worked in 16. But I didn't really get my self-esteem until I really started doing some work on myself and taking the skills that I'm giving you today in a very brief nutshell, and bringing them into my life. So the picture on the left is me on my wedding day. So this was a really happy day. And I was very much looking forward to creating a marriage that was different. But I realized I fell back into the same traps over and over again. And it took a lot of work to really build that conscious awareness. So you can see in my middle picture, I literally started crawling back into my shell because I had a very charismatic husband. And I just fell into the same old patterns that I had visited, that I'd seen with my parents and my grandparents. And it took a lot of work to get out of that, because I didn't know there weren't that many people at that time who had the awareness to work with that. I was lucky to find some. And you can see the last picture, progress is better than perfection. I mean, I just had a chat with Martha, and yes, there is still a bit of a perfectionist in me, but I'm much more relaxed about things. And quite honestly, when it comes to perfectionism, it's generally more a doing the best that I can, and having a standard of excellence rather than pleasing other people. So that's for me, that's a really important distinction. So I have done 40 years of my own personal development, and I have been working, as I said, for 27 years as a coach and trainer. So I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and so what I'm telling you and what I'm sharing with you right now is literally the work of all of those years. And it sounds like it's a lot, and it is. So what I'm inviting you to do is I'm going to introduce you to the 11 practices. Just take everything in to the degree that matters to you. Some of these things I will expand on, some of these I won't. If you're interested, I'm just saying this right now, I've got a quiz, and you're welcome to do that. And then you can have a free debrief session with me about this and find out where your skill set is at and if there's some opportunities for improvement. So what does it mean to be an adult? So you just saw that I was wearing a t-shirt, I can be an adult. So an adult is actually somebody who functions in a way that they can manage their daily life. But it's not necessarily about just the ability to pay rent and pay invoices and go to work and all of these things and take care of children. There are all these skills that I'm going to outline to you in a minute that define an adult that I call, the evolved adult from a typical normal adult, just somebody who just lives their life. And often is not really that happy because there are a lot of these dysfunctional patterns still in place. So being an adult, this comes from a school of psychology called transactional analysis. So when we communicate and when we act, we come from 3 different ego states. So the first one is the parent, and this is very simplified, the critical and the benevolent parent, so the well-meaning parent. And then we have the child, which is the needy and compliant, or the rebellious child. And generally what we do is we interact from these levels when we're in a dysfunctional relationship. And what happens is you don't have to be a parent in order to act from parent, and you don't have to have children in order to be able to act from child, because we all were children at some point and we've all had parents. So when we interact from this place, what we do is the critical parent can often really trigger the rebellious child, because if I tell you you're not good enough, and you're in rebellious mode, you're going to give me the middle finger and you tell me to go and play on the freeway. Because this is where people then procrastinate, they don't reach their goals, they engage in self-harming behaviors because they just don't want to get people's they don't want to get people's approval, and they don't care, so they get into that rebellious place. When somebody deals with, they can also flip into the opposite. When somebody is a critical parent, somebody can become a very needy or compliant child. So they will do everything to get their parents' approval. And that later in life then can be the partner, the employer, children, friends, anybody other than ourselves. So that means that we want to have everybody's approval. And often what we do this at the risk of losing the approval that we have for ourselves, because we literally turn ourselves into a pretzel to make that work for other people. So the same can happen when we have a benevolent parent. So when somebody just is very, very well-meaning, and we see this a lot at the moment. So there are the helicopter parents and the snowplow parents, and there are all sorts of other different parenting styles. And what they do is they create very needy children. And these are not the children that have resilience or the ability to deal with adversity. They just want the parent to help. So they can't really grow up in that sense. They will always want to have support, and they will always be in that place of, I can't do this for myself. So the goal is then to get to that place of adult to adult, where we literally, and I use the word literally a lot, forget. So where we interact with each other from that place of managing ourselves. And I'll tell you more about as we go through the presentation, what that actually means. So the 11 practices of emotional productivity in a nutshell are all of the things that are listed on the slide. So it's about being aware of your emotions. It's about managing your emotions, and then they're not necessarily in the order that I teach them, because they are I should really have them as a web. They all interact with each other, and one feeds the other. So it's really important to have all of these skills to create a whole holistic way of dealing with the world. So shifting your perception, focusing your attention, and the ability to listen. It's an art that's really disappearing. The ability to reset your negative emotions. So I don't like the word negative, because emotions are never negative. They're either unpleasant or pleasant, but they're always helpful. It's about meeting your needs. It's the ability to self-care. Managing your boundaries and maintaining them is really, really crucial. And often we don't know how to do that. Then it's the ability to engage with empathy. And this is that task focus, that task-driven focus that we have a lot these days. And so it's the ability to actually deal with people from that place of caring and helping people. So Martha is doing an amazing job. I mean, I have met very few people who are selfless as Martha, and I will define what selfless means in a minute. There's the ability to have difficult conversations, and I'll tell you why I call it difficult conversations and not conflict resolution later on. And then, of course, it's acknowledging wins. It's about celebrating. So the first one is recognizing emotions, and it's about knowing how you feel so that you can label your emotions and expand or shift your state. A lot of the time, people don't know how they feel. They generally say, when I ask them, how do you feel? They say, fine, or not too bad, or pretty good. But when I ask it, so tell me how you exactly feel, they don't know. They can't say, I'm frustrated, I'm joyful, I'm content, I'm irritated, because we rarely ever learn how to use these words, because when we use them, they can trigger people. So that's a topic I can talk about for hours. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a little bit of why emotions and recognizing it is so important, and where emotions actually come from. So we actually have three brains. One is in the head, one is in the heart, and one is in the gut. And they always talk to each other. They're in constant communication with each other. And in fact, the heart sends more information to the head than the head sends to the heart. And the gut is really, really crucial, because there's a direct connection from the gut to the brain in the head, and that then dictates how well we operate in the world. So we've got in the brain, we also have three brains. So they are the reptilian brain, which is the oldest brain. Then we've got which is all about the autonomic nervous system. It's about breathing, blood pressure, all of those things that we don't want to think about, because if we were to, we wouldn't even be able to move. There are millions of functions that happen all the time, and the reptilian brain takes care of those. The limbic brain is all about emotions and memory. It's also known as the mammalian brain, so we share that with mammals. And this is where we store all of these emotions that we have at some point, and we link them to an emotion. So especially negative experiences and stress and trauma get stored, because the brain's job is to help us get through difficult situations and prepare us for those to reoccur, so that we then prepared to deal with them in a more effective way. And then there's the neocortex, which is all about logical thinking, which is fairly new. It's only been around for a couple 100,000 years versus the other millions of years. And so this is the part that actually helps us to think logically. This is the part that helps us develop all of these human skills that we're talking about, and helps us also manage the limbic and the reptilian brain when we know how to use it. So the job of the brain, as I said, is to help us survive. So the brain collects patterns. So what it does, what it says, it's 1 time is an accident, twice is coincidence, and 3 times is the beginning of a pattern. So the more often we do something, the more often something happens, the more the brain remembers, the more it gets used to it. So I don't know if that's going to work. No, it's not. I had a lovely little video here, which shows you how neurons, we've got trillions of neurons, when they connect over and over and over again, how they create these neural networks. And these neural networks then don't have to think before they do something. They can react really, really quickly, which is why when we do something over and over and over again, we don't have to think about it. It becomes completely unconscious. Now, the problem is this can also affect relationships, because we get into these pattern loops where we connect with each other from that place of, oh, this is going to happen, so I'm going to react like this. So if one person raises an eyebrow, and that signifies to the other person that that means, oh, I've just screwed up, this is a sign of disapproval, then I will, and that happens a lot. Let's say my mother did that, and I was a really disobedient child, so she raised her eyebrow a lot. That means at some point I start registering this as disapproval. And so if somebody else does that and I'm not aware of it, and they raise an eyebrow because they're really curious and they want to find out more about what's going on, but I have stored this as disapproval, my emotional reaction will be one of what is going on. And depending on whether I come from critical, whether I come from needy child or rebellious child, I will either then go into, oh my God, what have I done for you to disapprove of me, or whatever, I don't care. So that's the electrical part of the brain. And then we have the chemical part of the brain. And the chemical part of the brain basically says that there's a gap between neurons, between nerve cells, and what happens is we produce all of these neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, cortisol, and adrenaline, for example. And what they have all very distinct shapes. And so with these distinct shapes log onto from one cell, when they get released, they log onto the receptors of the next neurotransmitter cell that have a very distinct shape. So for every neurotransmitter, there's one distinct shape, and they can never change when they get activated a lot. However, if we only use certain neurotransmitters, the body goes, well, you're never using the one for serotonin. You're never using the one to feel happy and content, but you're constantly stressed out. And being stressed out means, you want to be able to react really, really quickly. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I'm going to change things up. I am going to replace the neurotransmitter cells for serotonin with more for adrenaline and for cortisol, so you can react even faster, which means it's going to be harder and harder and harder to relax and recharge, because the body is now prepped for stress, and the consequences short term are not that great. But long term, they will have massive impact And I see people who operate from these stress levels of being, you know, like pleasing other people, not asserting their needs and their boundaries. All of these can lead to really significant mental and physical health situations. So, hang on. No. Okay, so I had a little video on how that looks like, what that looks like when you transport from one neuron to the other. So you just have to imagine that these neurons flow from one cell to the next, and what they do is they literally set up the biology. So when you have the same emotions over and over and over again, your body gets addicted to having those. You will need to have these more and more. And that's why often we stay in the same relationships, because we are just so used to them. We're literally, we're emotionally addicted to them, no matter whether they feel good or bad. Makes absolutely no difference whatsoever to the body. The body just says, I know this, I'm used to this, so therefore I'm going to stay with this. Which is why we also often get into the same relationships over and over again. My mother, for example, got married 3 times to her father. And she kept doing it over and over again because she said it felt familiar. She acknowledged that. We had a conversation about that, and she said, it doesn't matter whether it feels good or bad. I just know this is what I know. Now, she said, now that we've talked about it. Okay, so what I just wanted to give you very quickly 2 neurotransmitters, just so that you know how they affect the body, because they are really, really important. So adrenaline is produced in the glands on the kidney and on the kidneys. And so what happens is very quickly, if you just pull your arms back and you feel that if you're wearing one, but there's the bra strap generally, and about on that same level, you will have the adrenals sitting on the kidneys. And if you're feeling sometimes that there's a tingling, or when you stretch, it feels really awkward, that is actually a sign that you're on emotional, that there's adrenaline burnout. So any monkey, any guinea pig, any goat can produce vitamin C to combat stress, which has an incredible effect on the immune system. We can't. And now add to that we're eating foods that are not that great and lacking in vitamin C because we're harvesting fruit that's unripe and hasn't produced vitamin C yet. And then all of the other factors, we get really stressed out these days. And again, our immune system suffers. So if you've ever gone on holidays and you've gotten sick on the first day, you will know that your immune system has just kicked in. Because when you're really stressed out, what happens is your immune system goes on pause. When you're fighting for your life and your body makes no difference whether you're fighting a saber-toothed tiger or whether you're standing up to your partner and having a difficult conversation with them and wanting to assert yourself, and they question your competence or your status, it's exactly the same kind of response. At that point, your immune system shuts down, your digestive system shuts down, because there's no time to repair or to digest when you're fighting for your life. So again, these are short-term mechanisms that work really well in survival situations. Long-term, they're absolutely hazardous to your health. So you can see all of these physical responses. So you're getting more blood into the arms and the legs, which also then has the effect that at that point there's no blood in the frontal cortex, which means you can't think logically anymore because your blood is all in the arms and the legs. So you can fight harder, raise that club and hit harder, or fight back verbally, or you can run faster and remove yourself from the situation. So it's really important that you recognize that when you're in a difficult situation, really stressed out, your logical thinking is probably going to be out of the window, and your emotions, your limbic brain and your reptilian brain will have taken over. So then we have all of these other factors. So for example, your blood sugar levels are elevated. So your body releases sugar, it releases fats. And if they don't get used for running and fighting, they create all sorts of dysfunction again. So we're talking We're talking about high cholesterol levels. We're talking high blood pressure. We're talking about diabetes. These are all consequences of living in stress and being unable to manage your emotions and all these other things that I'm going to talk about. Cortisol is very much related to adrenaline. It's very, very high in the morning, and then it goes down during the day. But if that doesn't happen, if we keep getting more and more stressed out, then what happens is we don't defrag during the night. We don't go into homeostasis. The body does not reset. So when all of these things, when they come together, when cortisol and adrenaline are really high, and then we aggravate that through coffee, 1 cup of coffee can bring up cortisol levels 8 times. So if you imagine that you're drinking coffee during the day and cortisol is supposed to go down, at the end of the day, it will be even higher than it is in the morning. And again, your body will not go into repair mode. So you will also find that if you're constantly on stress and your blood is not in your brain, you will have brain fog and constant fatigue, and your ability to think logically, creatively, forecasting, staying in the moment is going to be really impaired. Okay, so the reason for all of that is actually there's a positive intent behind all of this. The brain really wants you to survive. So it will always focus on what it thinks doesn't work. It will prep you for the negative consequences of something. It will always think ahead of what could go wrong. For any of you who have had any kind of, oh my God, this could go wrong, or I'm giving a presentation, oh my God, I'm going to screw this up. I'm not going to be able to do this. That's your brain thinking of all the scenarios that could happen that impact your ability to do this well, because your brain wants you to be prepared for the worst, which isn't really helpful. You can actually learn to overcome that. There's some really impactful tools, and it's also about celebrating, focusing on what works. It's about being able to give yourself some constructive feedback and well as some praise. There are all sorts of things that you can do. But again, first and foremost, this is the job of the brain to make sure that you survive. And it does that by saying, this won't work and this won't work. So this is why I love the community that Martha has created, because there's always a solution. No matter whether somebody is in a funk or can't see the light, there will always be somebody who says, you can do this. And that is really, really important. This is why I love what Martha has created. Okay, so this is the thing that we were aiming for. We want to have more serotonin. And serotonin is produced in the central nervous system and in the gut. So what's really important about this is, remember how the brain shuts down when we get into stress, and adrenaline is really high, and then also the immune system and the digestive system shuts down. And then we're stressed out and we eat food that doesn't really serve us, because, what they say is garbage in, garbage out is the basis of the cells, the future cells. So when that happens, and what it does, it creates all the good bacteria in your gut, your immune system will be impaired, and it will be very unlikely that your body produces enough serotonin to create that state of inner contentment, happiness, and motivation. This is why we're reaching to all of these antidepressants these days, when in fact we can create that all for ourselves. I find it really hard. I mean, there is a place, don't get me wrong, there is a place for antidepressants, absolutely. But my experience is that doctors almost hand them out like lollies. What in the 70s was Valium, now and then became cocaine in the 80s, now has become serotonin, artificial methods to bring up serotonin. And when you find tools and ways to create that for yourself, you will become much more resilient. You'll be able to take things less personally. You'll be able to handle stress, and you'll be able to achieve your goals much more readily. So there are more, but I just wanted to give you these because they are really, really important. So whenever you manage your emotions really well and you're focusing on what works, you're producing serotonin, which will impact your overall well-being. Hang on. Okay, so we're moving on to managing emotions, and I'm going to keep that pretty short because that's a whole different topic. But it's really important to, and I've mentioned this before in the recognizing emotions. It's really, really important to reduce your stress so that you improve your health. So this is it in a nutshell. So self-regulation is really, really important. It is not just important for yourself, but it's also important for the people around you. Because while nobody can make us feel anything, what we do is our emotions are literally a contagion. They can permeate the space around us and create an atmosphere of drama, of frustration. I have worked in an organization where there was a receptionist, and I could see after a while of working there that people would come in the morning and they would view this person with great curiosity and fear because she was either in a really good place or she was in a really bad place. And if she was in a really bad place, she would cry, she would scream. She had no idea how to manage her emotions. And people would literally take that on. And I could see them come in full of vigor and then walking to their offices like they had deflated because they had taken on that emotion. So what I thought, again, can't do this. Forgive me. I mean, what I might do is I might, if Martha agrees, I can create a little video of this. There's a box breathing exercise, and what you do is you breathe in on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you hold for 4. You breathe out for 4. You hold, and you do that several times. And what it will do is it will reset your nervous system, and it will regulate your vagus nerve, which connects your gut to your brain and which also feeds into all the major organs. And what it does, it will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is for rest and recharge, and calm down the autonomous nervous system, which is in charge of fight or flight function. So the next skill that's important is the ability to shift your perception. So you know how you feel, you know how to manage your emotions, and you have the ability to think. What you do is at that point, you also know how to manage your judgments and assumptions because you know that not everything is meant personally, and you can explore other people's viewpoints. So this is really, really important because rigid perception creates all sorts of drama and dysfunction. It breaks up relationships because remember how we get into this place of really functioning on automatic because the brain has done something over and over and over again. So if you're in a long-term relationship, be it with your children, with your partner, at work, with your parents, there will be these feedback loops. And when your perception is only one way, you will only see the other person's behavior in a certain way. And if their loop back to you is also from a place of rigid perception, you will get into a place where you will run the same scenarios over and over again until you get to the place where you go, I can't do this anymore. And then, then you have inability to let go and forgive. You will get into revenge scenarios that can end really badly and in some cases into outright war. So it gets worse and worse and worse the more rigid we become in our perception. So the more flexible you are, the better. So the best way to shift perception, communication. And that is, again, it's a whole different topic, but there are various things that you can do to communicate more effectively. And one of those is ask questions. Check, is this really my perception? Is this true? Does this actually mean what I think it means? So the ability to say, when I hear you say this, is that correct? Or when I see you do that, what does that mean? Or tell me more about that. So ask. Sometimes I have been accused of creating a mountain out of a molehill because my pattern detection skills kicked in and my perception went, could this mean something else? So I would ask questions and people say, oh, this doesn't really matter. And I say, you know what? I'd rather know and find out about this now rather than my perception shifts into a place where it gets stuck. And then I end up in a place where I don't want to be, and maybe you as well. So another skill is, of course, to focus your attention. And so that's the ability to really be present and listen. That is not asking questions at this point. This is really just being present. So it's the ability to just be not on a mobile phone like this guy here and to pretend that he's listening while the woman is pouring her heart out, which is often what happens these days. Our ability to maintain focus has gone down considerably since we've introduced smartphones. We now hold attention for an average of 9 seconds. 9 seconds. That's it before we shift to something else. Anything after that, you can pretty much call meditation. So what you do is when you listen is you build connection, you build trust. And again, when you get to that place, then once you've listened without the need to respond, which is what listening is really about, and you get to the place where you want to find out more, then asking questions is really important. And then the person will fulfill a need that we all have, which is one of our absolute utmost important needs, and that's the need to be heard. And that's one of those needs that we often push aside. And what we do is instead we also give advice. So when we are not being heard, then why should we listen to other people? So the best thing you can do for somebody and for yourself is learn to listen and teach other people how to listen. And you have to sometimes teach people. You have to say, please, I just want to talk. I don't want you to say anything. Please just hold the bucket for me while I vomit into it. And when you teach people how to do that, it really creates a whole new level of empathy and understanding and compassion. So another really important skill is to the ability to reset emotions. As I mentioned before, I don't like the word negative. Negative is basically the emotions that are unpleasant, they don't feel good, we don't like them. So, but it's the ability to reset these emotions means you'll be able to let go of them. So you're able to let go of anger, frustration, and sadness. Let me be really clear. That does not mean that you don't feel them. The contrary, you feel them. You acknowledge them. You label them. You say, I'm feeling so frustrated right now, but then you're able to let it go. You don't hang on. Now, there's one thing that I know there's a difference between men and women. Men seemingly let go of these emotions by yelling, ranting, screaming, and shouting, and then they're called powerful. And when women do that, they're called hysterical. And I'm completely generalizing here. But what it is in the end, neither of those ranting and raging are really good for us. The ability to reset in a way that doesn't hurt relationships and those around us is really important. Now, whether you scream into a pillow or you sit in your car and you scream, or you have a friend you can trust who knows how to listen, who doesn't give advice, who doesn't stop listening after 9 seconds and say, oh, I know exactly what's going on for you and you should be doing this, but just says things like, that sucks. Gosh, I can hear that. That's really frustrating. Then what you do is that will also help you reduce your stress, reset your nervous system, and support your long-term health. And in the end, it will build resilience. So being able to let go of these emotions in a constructive and productive way is absolutely crucial for long-term health. And what it also does, it will create relationships that are really, really built on that sense of, I don't have to be at my best all the time, but I know how to manage it so that it doesn't impact you in a way that is hurtful. Because often what we do is we lash out to our nearest and dearest. But when we say, look, I am so frustrated right now, I'm so angry, I'm just going to go for a walk and maybe call somebody or scream or whatever it might be, and then come back and have a conversation afterwards, that will make a difference to everybody. I've taught this to many people, and I have been told that it's saved multiple marriages. And because you also know how to have these conversations of letting go, the vents and the ploms, as I call them. So you may notice that people have T-shirts on. So this is a language that I have developed. I call these, the yellows is the sunshine and the gray is the fog. And so we can either spread sunshine or we can spread fog. And so when you see people with their T-shirts yellow at the bottom and gray at the top, that means they're just resetting themselves. They're shifting from fog back into sunshine. When you see it's yellow at the top and it's gray at the bottom, they're getting sucked into the fog. Okay, so another really, really important topic is managing needs. And that means you know what's essential for your well-being. You know what matters in your relationship, and you know what you need in order to be successful. And success is not the promotion. It's not the big house or the car. Could be, but success is, what do you need in order to be fulfilled and content? Happiness, by the way, are just short bursts. So Martin Seligman, who developed positive psychology, said at one point, he said he wished he had never talked about happiness, the psychology of happiness, but more of the psychology of fulfillment, because happiness is just something that's situational, whereas fulfillment is much more long term. So needs are everywhere. We have them on every level: physical, mental, spiritual. We have them in relationships. We have them with ourselves. It starts from the basic ones of needs of safety, security, water, food, and all of that. But then it goes up to purpose and self-respect, to having healthy relationships, and all of these things that we need in order to live a fulfilled life. Now, this is the important thing. You remember how we have needs and emotions? Yes, they are all connected. So when our needs are not met, that's when we feel jealous, because we want, there's somebody who has a relationship with somebody and we would like to have that, or we're envious because they have things we don't have. We're frustrated, we're angry, we're drained, because a lot of these, unfulfilled needs drain energy because we're constantly holding them at bay. So I'm going to go back to the picture here so you can see needs are they're like water that flows through a hose. So needs flow all the time. You can't stop them. But if you say, I don't have needs, and you stop yourself, that means you put a kink in the hose, and eventually they have to go somewhere, and either the hose explodes or you fall over. Anything of that is happening. However, when you allow for your needs to flow and you manage them, then you will be able to express yourself and create all of these amazing relationships where you can actually negotiate these needs in a very comfortable place. The problem is also, here's when our needs are being met. We're excited, we're passionate, we're generous, we can share with other people. It doesn't come from that place, I have to, but it comes from I choose to. Now, the thing is we are very much in our society, especially women, we are praised for suppressing our needs, because we're in a tribe. The word self generally comes with the adjunct less. We get praised when we're selfless. And when we have a self, we're called selfish. So the ability to negotiate your needs and to be selfing, as Carolyn Mace, one of my teachers, used to say, because selfish is just such a negative word, we can't really use it. So selfing, the ability to give to self, really, really matters. So it's the ability to really say, this is what matters to me. Could we talk about that? It doesn't mean that I steamroll somebody and say, in order for me to be happy, you need to do this. So you know how you say, your job is to make me happy. It doesn't work like that. Adults do not expect other people to fulfill their needs. They negotiate them, and they find a way in which to make that happen. And sometimes they will take a big step back and it will say, yes, I am quite okay with being selfless, because I know that eventually it comes back, it's a give and take. The only people who have a right to have their needs taken care of, children and sick people. People who can't make their decisions for themselves because they've got certain physical or mental limitations. Otherwise, every adult has an obligation, and I use that word deliberately, to take care of their needs. And when you're in a partnership, it's about talking to the person and saying, so I have a need for this. Like when my now very lovely ex-husband and I, when we first moved in together, I had to say to him, I have a need for solitude. And when I mean solitude means that I need to have 2 or 3 hours where I just don't talk, where I don't do anything, where I read, I listen to music, whatever it is. So I love the fact that your need for support and for caring says that you come in every 10 minutes and say, darling, would you like a cup of tea? Would you like something to eat? Are you okay? But what I would ask is that you leave me that time. And then if you really need to, if your need is to support me in that way, make dinner or something like that. I would really love to have that time. And then he said, well, I really need this. And so it created a wonderful communication. That also led to our divorce because we realized our needs were no longer compatible. And that was perfectly okay because it led to a whole new wonderful relationship. So needs and emotions are absolutely crucial in every area of life. So they will determine the quality of your life and how content and how satisfied you are with what you have. So again, it's not just nice to have needs. And this is not needs is not a want. It's not I am going to be unhappy unless I have the Ferrari. A need is something that you cannot live without. And when you take care of that, you're ensuring a much longer and healthier life. So that brings us back to self-care. A lot of people sacrifice their self-care as part of their needs. So that means that if you really, and I always say you can't pour from an empty jug, you need to fill your jug. So there's all sorts of things we can talk about here. The most important thing is when you feel that you're sacrificing yourself and you get into that place of resentment, stop, take care of yourself. It's that nobody is served when you do something with resentment. And again, in the long term, it will impact your health. So this is one of my other really important topics that I could spend weeks talking about, really. And I actually started a podcast just on boundaries. I've done 52 on needs, and now I'm doing 52 on boundaries. I'm taking a break at the moment because of my needs, and I'm continuing that. So if you wanted to have a look at my YouTube channel, please feel free. So maintaining boundaries means you can say yes and you can say no. And it comes from a place of really wanting to do that. And as I said before, not from a place of resentment or obligation from needy child or rebellious child. So we drop our boundaries or we put up walls. And having flexible boundaries where you negotiate is a really, really important skill. So as a definition, what's really important is that these guidelines, these that you identify for yourself are reasonable, safe, and permissible. So sometimes people want us to say, this is my need and this is my boundary, so therefore you have to. So that's not a negotiation, that's taking somebody hostage. So that's where you have to look at where is your boundary firm and where is it flexible and where do you actually need to just take a step back and give that person a little bit of space. So the important thing to recognize is we're always good at recognizing our own boundaries, but there are also other people who have boundaries. So in relationship, it's the importance is to recognize that when you know where your boundaries are and where the other people's boundaries are, then you can negotiate that. So there are different kinds of boundaries. So we've got physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, time, and negotiable. So time, for example, is again, the time that I negotiated with my ex-husband, this is what I need, but it's also recognizing that somebody else's time is valuable and being respectful of that. Financial boundaries, people often don't put that in place. So this is when people get into real stress, for example, around Christmas. This is why credit cards go through the roof around Christmas time, because people haven't set any kind of boundaries around what it means to have, what kind of gifts you should give. And the expectations are, you have to give more than you are able to. The really important ones are the non-negotiable ones, and I'm sure you've got those. My really non-negotiable ones, based on what I've experienced in my youth, is I will not tolerate screaming, yelling, and shouting. I draw the line at that, and it's a deal breaker for me. If somebody communicates in that way and insists on doing that, I'm out. So just to throw a bit of psychology in there, and I know this is a lot, but I would ask you to just pick out what really matters to you, and you're going to find what that is. And then you can go back to the recording and watch that again. So the locus of control is something that I know that my clients have found really useful because it helps them identify when they're dropping their boundaries, when they're rigid in boundaries, or when they're really flexible. Because when we have an external locus of control, it means that we think that other people are responsible and in control of the situation. They make us feel. Nobody makes us feel anything. We can blame, we can outsource responsibility. We can say, you're not fulfilling my needs. You're not helping me with this. It's because of you that I'm not doing this. It's because of you that I'm not getting this. It's because of you that the children are like that. It's because of you that I don't have success. So, and sometimes we outsource to a higher power because, there's a God that doesn't want me to have that. Again, religious beliefs taken aside, an internal locus of control means that I decide about my behavior, I decide my emotions, and I decide how I deal with situations. And if you want to put religion into that, I love the concept of co-creating. I have to show up in a certain way in order for things to happen. So just notice that when you're coming from that external locus of control, chances are your boundaries are impaired because you will allow other people to manage things for you. So when you go in, when you're able to deal with that pressure, when somebody pushes against you, your boundaries, and we do this all the time. Boundaries are not set once. You need to reset your boundaries every single day in every single interaction. There's a part of you that will always check what's going on. The important thing is that you know that you need to manage your boundaries and your needs and your emotions. When you've got all of this in balance, and this is my lovely neighbor and friend Mel, when you know how you feel and you know how to manage your emotions and you know how to manage your needs, you can set your boundaries. When you know what your boundaries are, you can negotiate your needs, and then you can also manage your emotions. So this is the basis of everything that I think we do. That's the model according to Angela. Okay, now this is really timely because it's about balancing task and relationship focus. I realize, again, I'm throwing a lot of information at you. And ideally, what I would love to do is create a relationship around this. So and this is what we often forget. So I'm very aware of time and I'm very mindful. But if you're engaged in a longer term relationship with somebody, it's really, really important to say, I get to know you as a person as well. So when I work with people in a work environment, they go in and they immediately start changing things. They immediately go in and we need to improve this. We need to do this better. They don't get to know the people. They don't necessarily understand that. They get into task focus. And then they come home at night and they deal with the family exactly the same way. You need to do this. You need to you need to do your homework. You need to clean up. You need to do this. And what we often do is we forget that we're human beings. We're not human doings. And when we come from that place of respect and want to understand what's going on for the other person, when we understand their boundaries and their needs, without having to twist ourselves into a pretzel, but really acknowledge that and again, have that communication and talk about it. What you do is you will create that trust and that communication and that connection that we all crave so much. Difficult conversations. Wow, that's a big topic. But I thought what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of a reframe. So a very small tool. Everybody is when I talk about difficult conversations, people generally go, oh, I can't have that. Now, coming from an environment where we didn't have difficult conversations, we didn't have conversations because there was either yelling, screaming, and shouting or medicating. And so any kind of discussion about any kind of topic eventually ended up in drama because it's like when we don't know how to deal with that, then it's really hard to maintain that trust. So what I want to do is I want to offer you a little bit of a reframe. Instead of being afraid of difficult conversations, let's replace it with something else. So when you look at the definition in the dictionary, what conflict stands for, it's all about clash. There are words like war, prolonged. There's impossible. Have a look. I mean, I can't get to this at the moment, but the definitions that I found all about disagreement, disharmony, mutually exclusive, and it's what it is. It says cannot be resolved. So when we talk about conflict resolution, that's actually not possible. Just the words will create a disorder in the brain about how is that actually possible. So what I'm inviting you to do is reframe this. So instead of having a conflict resolution or a fight or whatever you call it, change it into a constructive discussion. Because constructive means helping to improve. And a discussion is something we talk about, something in order to reach it, or typically in order to reach a decision. So when you have an issue with somebody, don't consider it to be a conflict, consider it to be an opportunity for a constructive discussion, which can actually enhance the relationship. It can help you build more trust, more understanding, more empathy, more connection, because it's an opportunity to clarify. So you get into the ability to shift perception, to listen, to communicate. So all of these things that I talked about before come to the fore. And then, of course, there's celebrating wins. So it's the ability to give feedback. Now, I come from an environment where if I came home with an A minus, my parents wanted to know why it wasn't a straight A. And so that what it does, it eventually creates that sense of never being good enough. So this thing comes also from again, that's the negativity bias of the brain. Right? If I'm prepared, if I'm never good enough, I'm going to strive to be better. So I'm going to survive even, my chances for survival are even greater. So that's going to be a really interesting scenario in the long run, because we're getting into approval and disapproval and all of these things that I've mentioned before, and we're trying to be perfect. Whereas when we celebrate wins, what we do is we create this environment, this psychological safety where people can speak up, they can contribute. You will find, again, this at any age, people will want to contribute and share what's important to them. And so we can all grow together and we can achieve together. Whereas if we're just constantly in this place of keeping each other small, that doesn't happen. So celebrate the wins. Now, what does this mean? When you raise your arms and you go, yay, what you're actually doing is you're creating a dopamine boost in your brain, and dopamine is the reward chemical. Now, you can do that by taking drugs or playing a game, where you get lots of coins or whatever it means. But simply raising your arms is a much healthier and non-addictive way of doing it. It's built in. It's a biological function you will see little children do. So raise your arms. And whenever you have a win, raise your arms and go, yay. And if you've got somebody with you and you're doing it together, you're doubling the effect. So that would be my suggestion. Oop. Okay. So here are some tips for further to take this onto the next level. So become and stay aware of your feelings. Notice that change is always uncomfortable because your neurons, remember when we've got these neurological networks, they are linked to emotions. And when we start making changes, the body goes into, nah, that feels off. I don't really want to do that. So whenever you start feeling uncomfortable when you're doing something, celebrate, because your neural networks are changing. So notice when you're going on automatic. So have that self-awareness and then write things down. Diarizing is a really great way of keeping track of these things and developing more self-awareness, especially around your needs and your boundaries and your emotions, of course. And then remember, you can't change others, but you can change yourself. So if you're going into any kind of self-development work and you want to develop skills, don't do it because you're doing it for other people. And I often find this with women. They're doing it for the people around them. Do it for yourself, because you are the only person who eventually will be happy with yourself. Everybody else will find something to nag about. As somebody said to me, said to me once, you can produce and you grow, produce, sell the loveliest, juiciest, most gorgeous peaches in the world. There will always be somebody who doesn't like peaches. So you might as well enjoy what you're doing for yourself. And so that also means having fun. So keep moving. Small movement forward is better than no movement at all. Learn from others who have learned. So participate in the group, share what's going on, and then take it into action. Don't just take it as feedback and go, okay, now I know, and go back into comfort zone, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Just make the changes and make small changes. They really matter. Big changes often go back. This is why New Year's resolutions don't work. But if you make micro changes every single day, you respond to one situation differently, you're going to make a difference to your brain. You keep doing that, you keep doing this for a longer period of time, you will eventually change not only how you think and how you feel, you literally change your biology, ensuring long-term health and well-being. Thank you for your attention. If you want, as I said before, please do my emotional productivity quiz and book in for a session. And I'm happy to talk to you about what comes out of your quiz and maybe have some insights that will support you on your way forward. Thank you for your attention.
That was just amazing. Let me turn myself back on. It's just been an amazing. I'm at so much wow. In the comments there, you will see it, and it's like, wow, there's just so much golden nugget in there. So I'll put the link to the quiz into the show notes as well to let people know how to actually get in touch with you and learn more about it. So if there's anyone that have any questions about it, feel free to drop it into the chat. We will either talk about it today or we can actually come back to actually answer your questions. But while you're doing the presentation, I can tell you that I literally can think of about 10 people that I can send this recording to actually tell them that, hey, you know what, this is why you're feeling like this is why you're doing that, this is what you can do, this is what I've been telling you for the last don't know how many months, but this is another way of explaining to help you to understand. Because it is true sometimes that we can talk to our faces blue, but sometimes it's just a different way of saying it. It can trigger people and let them know that there's a differences in it.
Yeah. Well, it's taken me a while to put it all together. I hope, it's like there are a lot of complex patterns behind this, and there are skills and all of that. But I hope I've given you an insight and simplified but useful, because I'm really passionate about this. And I know that, like people talk about passion. I really am. Because
I love
I know what a difference it's made. I mean, I haven't lived a life of regret. I have made choices where my family went, oh, you're kidding. You're moving countries again. You're changing jobs again. And and in the end, the only person I pleased was myself, but I am a very happy person, and I'm using content, fulfilled, so, and that was really matters, because a lot of the people who have the criticism, which is an opinion, don't. And so I would always encourage everybody, what other people think about you is none of your business. Please yourself.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think all of us need to listen to it and realize that, hey, we really don't need to give a care about what other people say. Those people are not coming in to clean your dishes, take your rubbish out, or clean your cat litter, for God's sake. So why do they matter to you so much? It is a question that you have to ask yourself and realize that, hey, you know what? You are in charge. You are the boss of this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela, for sharing all of those knowledge with us. I'm like soaking it in at the moment. It is just so beautiful. I'm definitely going to actually look back into it again because it gives me so many light bulb moments. And I'm sure that our community will be greatly benefit to it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm really grateful that you've created this group.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our listener and our audience for today's session in The Knowledge is Power. I believe that you can find something you need from our sessions here today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again next week.